Welcome in, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, Billy Muzio, my co-host, Jody Smith, with me today. Jody, we have some celebrations in order tonight.
What's going on, man?
I think we both did pretty damn good in these rankings for 2021. I didn't even know. I wasn't even on Twitter this morning, and I just woke up and I get a text message from Jody, and he says, "Congratulations, dude." And I'm like, question mark? What happened? and you sent me the link for the Fantasy Pros, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool to wake up to. But I was really excited to see you in that list as well. I mean, we have 2 top 8 finishes for 2021. We're the only site in the industry with 2 players in the top 10. You are also in the top 10 for year after year accuracy rankings. So hats off to you for that, being consistent. But overall, a very good showing for both of us here for the Full-Time Fantasy site. And looking forward to our projections and our rankings here in 2022.
Well, Billy, the real congratulations should go to you because to finish number 1 in draft rankings, I mean, it's validation. It really is. For someone like yourself who hasn't been doing this as long as I have, it shows that your process, all the work that you put in, paid out. It's a totally different monster to do in-season rankings, which you and I have both been pretty successful at. I believe you were number 1 for a week last year, and you finished 3rd 2 other weeks, which that's phenomenal. I finished 17th overall, which out of, you start off at over 200. That's pretty good. But it's validation for you. You should, this is something that Matt Harmon from Yahoo, who we all know, won this last year. It shows how difficult it is to win, how prestigious it is, and major props and congratulations to you. Couldn't be any proud of your brother. I know how much work it actually goes into doing that, and I thought maybe you could, tell us a little bit about your process, your analysis. What are you doing in the summer? You don't need to get too detailed because obviously you don't give away your secrets. But what is it that you see? I've always thought that with you're bringing this completely aggressive, different, progressive and aggressive, forward, different view of things because you're a high stakes player and you've been very successful at that. And I feel like that's what makes you and I click and makes us work. I'm more of a traditional guy and you're looking at things from a completely different lens. And I think, when you and I do get together, and we're going to talk about projections and rankings and all today in this show, but I like to get your insight because, like I said, you're looking at things differently. So, tell us a little bit about, if you can remember, your process this summer and what do you feel like? I know you and I talked off there about your boy Debo. So,
yeah.
You loved him and he was probably was a major component in why you finished number 1.
Yeah, so the running backs and quarterbacks, surprisingly, actually, were the 2 areas that I scored top 5 in the pre-draft rankings. Running backs, I traditionally have done well in my rankings or with even analysis with high stakes and ADP and drafting teams. So I wasn't too surprised there, but I think a lot of it was just taking risks and taking gambles. And if you hit on them right, I think you just hit the hammer on the nail. I have a little bit more risk tolerance than the average Joe because of the involvement I have in the high stakes community and playing in high stakes drafts. So, I put Eckler at running back 3. I put him there. Nobody else had him there. I remember in that Sports Illustrated draft I did with Fabiano last year, it was a talking point that I took him over Derrick Henry, and then I took him over all these other players, and I said I don't really care about ADP, and that's what the beauty about high stakes is. ADP is just out the window. We had a guest on last week, or earlier this week, I should say, on the Meet the Player segment for the Grind Time show, and Glenn Currant said, average draft position is exactly what it is. It's average. And we aren't playing to be average, I think was the quote. And it stuck with me because he's absolutely right. And you see in these high stakes drafts and in these, cutthroat leagues, we're talking about, $2,000 buy-ins, $5,000 buy-ins, $10,000 buy-ins per team. People go out of their way and just say, F average draft position. I don't give an F. I'm going to take who I think is going to be the best player. So players go 2-3 rounds ahead of ADP. They go 2-3 rounds after ADP. It's very interesting to be in these drafts because you never know what to expect. Yes, you're always going to have the people who are going to suck up, value and just continue to be value-based drafters. But I think to answer your question, I brought a lot of that mentality over into my rankings section because I said, you know what? If you ain't first, you're last, Ricky Bobby style. And I just want to make sure that when I'm doing these, I'm going to stick to players who I think are going to make a big impact. And I'm going to just hang my hat on a couple players that I know, in my opinion, who are going to break out or have career years. Eckler was a good example. Debo was a good example. If players listened to these calls at the beginning of last year, they probably won a lot of money. That being said, though, my process was projections, and you have done most of the legwork on that for us this year. I'm going to catch up now, but you have to do projections. I mean, you're at a severe disadvantage if you are not breaking down statistics for every team. When I say statistics, we're talking about every single pass attempt, every single completion, every single interception, every single touchdown, every single attempt, rushing yard, you name it, top to bottom, left to right. And not just that, then we're looking at statistical averages. We're looking at the, yard per carry, the yard per reception, their career averages as well as trends. So I think that's where I differentiate from a lot of different people is I didn't stick to just their averages or I stick to just what their last 3 or 4 years were. I looked at it from a human element because I'm a big film guy. I'm a big believer in the human element in football. And it kind of goes above the metrics, above analytics, and says, how is the human factor going to adjust this person's rankings or their projections? And you look at offensive lines, you look at coaching schemes, you look at head coaches, you look at who their quarterback is, you look at chemistry, right? Cooper Kupp and the Breakfast Club with Stafford. How is that going to come into play inside these rankings? And I think that's a major piece that people miss. They just get so tied up in their averages and statistics and the analytical side of it, where they forget about the important side of it, and it's what drives people. It's the motivation behind that player and what's going to make them successful in the NFL. And so I think that has to have at least some sort of weight in projections. And yes, you may miss, or you may be way off, or you may misjudge someone, but that's the same in analytics as well. So I think it's just another element or layer that needs to be analyzed when doing projections. And then, quite frankly, my kind of checklist, my balance, the yin and yang, was when I was finished with my projections, I compared it to ADP and high stakes. I mean, we're talking about some of the best drafters in the world, some of the sharpest minds, in my opinion, people who literally have skin in the game. When we're talking skin in the game, we're talking $20,000, $30,000 invested in buy-ins. These people are diehards. I mean, and if I'm missing something, like let's just say that I was off on a player by like 20 spots based upon where they're going in high stakes and where my projections had it. I then analyze that difference and say, why am I so far off, right? If I can justify it, great, he stays. Whether he's 20 spots higher, 20 spots lower, I don't care. If there's a justification, he stays there. If I can't justify it, or if I'm find myself making excuses for maybe my poor original projection, I need to go back and analyze what happened in that projection, and I need to tweak it in order to at least be more mindful of an egregious error that I may have made. Because we're human. It happens, right? Maybe you fat fingered something. Maybe you didn't analyze the situation properly. Maybe you missed the scheme, right? Like beginning of my projections, I didn't have Mike Williams as high as I did. And my draft partner, Dave, was a big component of me moving Mike Will at my rankings. So he started talking about the Lombardi system. And I was like, okay, yeah, this all makes sense, right? You kind of bounce those ideas off your peers and you just soak it all in, and it kind of plays into your projections. So long-winded answer, but that's it.
That's kind of where you and I are going to be now. You're going to be that Dave when I'm presented, which I've already done. I've already done all the legwork on the back end. So now we just need you as the younger guy looking at things from a different lens to come in and, tell me what you're thinking, and then we can come to a compromise. But one of the things you said was the difference between a successful high stakes player versus a more conservative value-based drafter. Nothing wrong with that strategy, but typically a laid-back value-based draft system that you don't take a lot of risk reward in, that's the kind of team that can get you into the playoffs. I don't know if it's necessarily going to win it for you, in particular in something prestigious like the FFWC, where you're talking some of the best, smartest drafters in the world. And what's difficult for a lot of people to get there is these aren't people that are often active here in the Twitter space. They don't have a ton of followers. They're not
lurking in the shadows.
They do this for a living. Consistently they have their own system. They have their own numbers and all that. They don't need other people catching on to what they're doing. So they would prefer to just sit back and just continue to make a living doing something like that. So it's difficult for a lot of people to understand that part of high stakes. And the key point of what your long-winded, as you called it, answer was for projections. If you look at something like Fantasy Pros, a contest that uses a different system to grade and to rank people and all that, the analysts that consistently are doing their own projections, whether it's in the summer like we've done now, or the ones that are doing it weekly every week, those are the people that are seeing everything on every team, that have such a distinct advantage in this contest. And when you look at over the last, the multi-year accuracy, you look at that top 10, it's nothing but people typically who continue to churn out great content, but are doing projections. They're looking at these numbers pretty much each and every week. And like I said, wow, when it comes to like the back end here at Full-Time Fantasy that I've done, I've done all the players, every offensive position.
Dude, you're a fucking animal.
IDP, kick returners, linebackers, cornerbacks, safeties, everything. But you know what? It keeps me sharper. It makes me better, because a lot of times, during the season, it become a grind. If you're running multiple leagues, and Billy, you said how many hundreds of leagues, whatever, were you trying to run? And you cut back finally, right?
I did cut back this year. I'm going to be under 100 this year. Again, that's managed leagues. That's not best ball.
And you're talking having to take some time out every week to mess with that kind of stuff, and to try to write, and to do things around the house, and to take care of stuff. To be good at this, to be successful at it, to really give it a go and all that, you've got to be willing to make that commitment. You can't take shortcuts. You can't plan, a few days off, a week off from, July, maybe even August through February.
No, there's no day off in football. There's never really a day off. In this industry, as we all know, it's become 24/7, 365, because as soon as the Super Bowl comes, all right, maybe you can go ahead and finally take that trip to Maui, you take that week off. But guess what? When you come back, you need to catch up on all the draft stuff, because guess what? The combine's right around the corner, and you got to start film. Or you're drafting in your hotel room when your kids are asleep. That's what I'm doing.
Well, whatever you're going to do. But like anything else in life, if you want to be the best of the best, if you want to differentiate yourself and separate yourself from the pack, you've got to be willing to grind time, and you got to be willing to put in that work. And Billy, I know you've been doing this. You haven't been doing this quite as long as me, but your rise is very, very impressive to see. And I'm just glad you're on our side, buddy. I'm glad you're going to make me your insight, and I'm looking forward to our rating summit that's coming up this weekend. You're going to make me, a better analyst in itself, and I'm looking forward to that. And we'll help each other. And
I'm really enjoying our time of us working together. I'm excited for us to continue to blossom as analysts together. There's a quote, and you said hard work and people who are dedicated in this industry and people who are putting in the work. There's a quote, and if you're on your FFWC account, now it's live, you can click the profile button, and that transports all of your hobbies, your interests. You have a quote in there, yours playing fantasy football. It's kind of like a mini Facebook page per se, but on the high stakes community. So it brings that sense of community into our leagues. And there's a quote, because you can put your favorite quote in there. And I put one of my favorite quotes in here from Tim Notke, and it says, "Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard." And I am a firm believer in that, because I'm just a grinder, man. I haven't been doing, like you said, I'm not an analytics guy normally. I've forced myself to become more analytical.
Another thing to mention is all the work you've put on the FFWC side to make all them improvements. It's so much, it's night and day how much better that end and that site is now. And that's all off your back, all your work.
Oh, it's a team effort on that part. But let's hop into, nonetheless, people aren't here for us to just talk about all of our successes. As wonderful as that may sound to us, sit here all night. Yes!
I'll bring this. I'm bringing this to Canton.
You can wear that one all night, and I'll wear this one all night. We'll just strap it around my chest. Let's run through our rankings. Let's give people a chance to ask questions. Let's just run through maybe 20 quarterbacks. We'll just list the names, and then we can talk about differences in your rankings, differences in my rankings, maybe pick a player or two that we are different on versus consensus, who you're higher on, who I'm higher on, who you're lower on, who I'm lower on. Just as a quick skim through for the listeners, we'll start at the top. Consensus rankings for the full-time fantasy page. Josh Allen as quarterback 1, Justin Herbert as quarterback 2, Patrick Mahomes quarterback 3, and this is where we start getting a little bold. Tom Brady at 4, Matt Stafford at 5, Lamar Jackson at 6, Russell Wilson at 7, Joe Burrow at 8, Kyler Murray at 9, Dak Prescott at 10, Jalen Hurts at 11, Aaron Rodgers at 12, Kirk Cousins at 13, Matt Ryan at 14. That's also not consensus. Derek Carr at 15, Trey Lance at 16, Baker at 17, Tua at 18, Wentz at 19, and Justin Fields at 20. Who are you higher on? I mean, this is our consensus rankings. Who do you think that you're higher on here on this list, or maybe versus the consensus versus the other pros that you want to kind of either one, explain yourself, or two, just discuss because fuck it, we can.
Looking at the top 10, Tom Brady, like you mentioned, that it was a little bold, I guess, to have him where we are at 4, but it's just the track record. You know, even at the advanced age that he was last year, what was he, 44, 45? You still see apps. He still put together probably the second best season of his entire career. I think he had his most passing yards ever. Granted, it's with 17 games now, but there's just no signs of slowing down. And I already had him, up in that range now. And now you're adding potentially Julio Jones if he has anything left in the tank, but you're adding him to the mix there. So I don't see any signs that Tom Brady's slowing down. And to me, it's just that consistentness. And then, so Russell Wilson, I think people are generally, it's not unusual to see Russell Wilson fall out of the top 10 at quarterback. I think in FFWC ADP, he may be QB 12 or 11, somewhere in that range right there. I mean, overall, I love, Russell Wilson this year. Before last season, which was the first time in his whole career he missed some time, he was, I want to say, 5th and 3rd in fantasy points the previous 2 years. And that was with a Seattle team that was, I won't say they didn't have a lot of offensive talent, but what you have in Denver, the weapons that he's going to potentially have in Denver and how they've been gelling, working together as a unit this whole offseason, I'm really interested in Wilson. And I feel like, once he's healthy, up speed, which all indications are he's 100%. So he's going to, I think you're going to see the rushing production go back up, and it won't surprise me at all to see Wilson be, top 5. And the other in the top 10 that kind of maybe a little bit sticks out to people would be, well, there's a couple, is that we're slightly lower on Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. And Burrow, Billy, I'm gonna give the floor to you with Burrow, but your theory on Joe Burrow, which really kind of opened my eyes, was spot on. And how you feel like he pretty much peaked last year, like everything fell into place about as good as possible for a quarterback, and he still finished at QB 7 or QB 8. So you feel like there's not really a lot of potential or growth for him, right?
Yeah, and so that's a hammer on the nail. I mean, if you look at the fade list over at the Full-Time Fantasy site, this goes into detail. I can read part of it for folks just so that they know exactly what we're talking about here. I've said it in there. I say it again. I love Burrow. I really like his weapons. I like what this offense did. But everything he did last year, I mean, we look at, regression this year, and it's imminent. He led the league in completion percentage last year, 70.4%. He was 8th in the league in touchdowns, 6th in the league in money throws, 3rd in the league in touchdown rate at 6.5, 8th in the league in deep ball completion percentage at 43.1, 2nd in the league in true passer rating at 3rd in the league in accuracy rating. I mean, all these are just amazing. They sound so great, but you hit the hammer on the nail. He was still quarterback 8 despite all those top end finishes. you look at strength of schedule now, and this is a difficult strength of schedule. How much more can he do in order to give you a return on investment at that average draft position or in your rankings, even if you're just doing projections or rankings? Like, you have to be mindful of where he finished and the cap, maybe, per se. And I hate to say it, but that might be the cap. Maybe I'm wrong here, but maybe he's going to come out and be top 3 in every one of these categories. Unlikely, in my opinion.
Quarterback, I mean, it's just gotten so deep. I mean, honestly, you can argue. Some people can argue up to 20 quarterbacks they feel like you can win with. So when you're looking at a, 4-back, like you see in FFWC, I did a draft review, and I just didn't understand the logic in a 16 or 18 round draft of taking 2 quarterbacks when waivers are going to open up before the season. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And quarterback is it's like I said, it's deep. So. Maybe with Burrow, it's not an issue of him needing to do more to be better. It's an issue of, can you find 2 or 3 of these elite, excellent quarterbacks that have been consistent for many, many years? Can 2 or 3 of them all, regress, or are they going to get hurt or whatever? It feels like it would take maybe a little regression from someone else for him to move up. Not, again, I think we both are saying in particular as an NFL quarterback, but we love Joe Burrow, and I'd be more than ecstatic to have him on any of my fantasy teams. But I just don't feel like it hasn't happened yet for me. And it feels like because of, it's a little recency bias too, Billy, with them coming off an AFC championship. So maybe people are overreacting a little bit.
Well, and we've seen that adjust. So in the beginning of drafts, when I say the beginning, like I was drafting in February, even before the Super Bowl. And so we had, at that time, he was going in like the 5th round. It was just asinine, right? And he was going as like QB5 off the board. He was going behind Allen, Herbert, Mahomes, and at times it was Joe Burrow at 4, or it was like Lamar at 4 and then Burrow at 5. That is where I started writing that fade list. Since then, and recency bias kind of wore off, we saw Burrow start to kind of cool down in the draft rooms, back to where I kind of had him ranked in that 7, 8, 9 range.
Maybe it's all because of your article, man.
No. I appreciate the hype there, but I think it's just that the people started realizing, one, strength of schedule came out. It was tough. But also what we just said, regression is possible. There's a lot of quarterbacks up here that have been consistently in the top 5, 6. We're not saying that we don't like Burrow. He's our 8th ranked quarterback. That may be low compared to some sites. I think it's about right. But overall, what we're saying is that, Joe Burrow definitely has, a lot of hills to climb in order to outproduce last year's numbers. Another quarterback that we're higher on, you're higher on than I am, Matt Stafford. You have him at 5 here. Do you want to kind of walk me through why we're so high and why you're so high? I'm higher on Matt Stafford as well, but you're a little higher than me at 5.
It's just an issue of, I feel like with Allen Robinson in that offense now, to me, it's actually going to be quite a bit of an upgrade. We didn't really get to see, a full season of how Stafford would have meshed with Robert Woods, and we're not obviously going to get that chance. But Allen Robinson, has always managed to be a really, really good fantasy player despite having almost nothing at quarterback throughout his whole career. So I'm really, really interested in that. Speaking of Robinson, when back in February, when us degenerates were already drafting and looking at things, if you'll remember, Robinson's ADP was in the 40s. It was way down there. I just couldn't believe it because I just thought, wait a minute, we just saw what Stafford could do for a Rams offense. And, Jared Goff, fine player, but clearly Matt Stafford, significant improvement, upgrade for the entire team. And, it paid off. They've got rings now because of that trade. So we started seeing like, wow, this is going to be really interesting. So, in early drafts, I was scooping up all of that Allen Robinson, but no, clearly that wasn't the only one because, gosh, if you think about this offseason, I can't think of anyone else who's moved up 20-something spots probably. And it's all just because people like you and me were out there like, huh. So, you
looked at anywhere he was going to land was going to be better than his current situation, right? It's one of those things. It was like Chase Edmonds too. It's like it didn't matter where he was going to land. He wasn't going to go any lower than where he was currently being drafted at. He was like going in like rounds 12 and 13 at times. It's like I don't even care if he lands on the Patriots. He's still 12, 13. That's still low for his skill set. So I think that was the similar kind of thought process with you and I with Allen Robinson. Is regardless where he lands, it's only going to go up. It's not like he's going to go down based upon where he's going to land, because it wasn't going to be much worse than where he came from. I get why you're that high, Stafford. I like Stafford too. I'm a little lower. Stafford for me is going to be that QB 11 range. I've kind of moved him and Trey Lance back and forth. I like Trey Lance. I like the rushing upside.
I feel like this at quarterback this year. So to me personally, there's like this group of 14 guys that I feel like really happy with. And that little group to me stops with Derek Carr. I'm not as high on Derek Carr as a lot of other people. I feel like one time in he either has 7 seasons or 8 seasons under his belt. He's been a QB1 one time, exactly once, and that was last year, and he snuck in his QB12. And that was with 23 touchdowns, which is a little concerning. He's only hit 30 touchdowns once. So anyway, I'm not that high on Derek Carr, so I cut off the guys I want there. The guy that sneaks into me at 14th in that number is Matt Ryan, who I feel like is going to be in a situation like Matthew Stafford last year. Like all of a sudden, a guy who's been a consistent, really good NFL quarterback and fantasy provider for years, all of a sudden got thrown into a competent, better team and a better offense with a Frank Reich and a coaching staff that are
fantastic O-line as well.
Quarterback wanderers, quarterback, what's the word I'm looking? Whisper. That are able to make Carson Wentz, credible again and all that. So I feel like if I'm waiting on quarterback, like, Derek Carr is obviously a guy, and Kirk Cousins, another guy that every year you can start. All those guys, I mean, you could argue, Pat Mahomes. So we have Pat Holmes probably a little higher than everyone else. I mean, there's a legitimate reason for people to be concerned. They're taking Tyreke Hill out of that offense. So is Patrick Holmes maybe going to become a dink and dunk guy? Is he maybe? I mean, I honestly feel like he's going to overcome it. But if someone dropped Pat Mahomes down to QB8, QB9, below Jalen Hurts, below Joe Burrow, below Stafford, Russell Wilson, Kyler, all those guys, I mean, you can't say it's egregious. You can just be like, okay, well, I get it. But to me, it just goes to show what I'm saying is, how good the top half of quarterbacks are. Like, if I feel like my number's 14, some people's number is up to 20. But my number, I feel like if I have one of these 14 guys, and of course in a normal 12-person league, by the math, you should make it work. I feel like I can win with those guys.
Yeah, my number is more like 21, 22. I feel like, grinding the waiver wire.
Different thing. Listen, this is taking it more conservative, which you are, Billy. You're more, like we talked about at the top of the show,
risk tolerant.
So if you feel like, hey, I'm going to win with Justin Fields and Trey Lance, number 1 quarterback and points per drop back, Tua, I believe in Tua and the revamped offense. If these are like what you're thinking, if that's at all, hey, look, I'm on board with that. I'm all for you. I'm, from a more conservative standpoint, I said 14. But if you're, like I said, in that latter group where you like these more athletic youngsters that you think are good enough to get you over the edge, well, then, yeah, 20 guys, 22, whatever.
Yeah, I want to throw 2 names out here that I'm higher on than our consensus rankings. One, the consensus is Jared Goff at 23. Davis Mills consensus at 25. In my individual rankings, I have Jared Goff at quarterback 19. And then in my individual rankings, Davis Mills, I have at quarterback 21. So not major jumps, but it moves them both up quite a bit.
And absolutely nothing wrong with that. Davis Mills, overall, we here at Houston, I think should walk away like ecstatic at how he performed as a lower regarded prospect that lasted until the 3rd round. He far exceeded any expectations on a Houston offense last year that was, quite frankly, garbage. And it's hard to argue that there'll be a little bit of the O-line will be a little bit better. I think the backfield's probably going to be better with Pierce and Marlon Mack, but losing John Mechie, that'll hurt a little bit because outside of Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins, the Texans don't have a lot of depth at wide receiver, so that's an issue. But I like Davis Mills, and if I saw him as somebody's QB 19 or 20, again, I don't argue it at all. And who was the other one you said?
Jared Goff, and that's the reason why I wait on quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm higher on these guys.
Super flex, Goff is the ideal guy where you wait to take your QB2 and you get Goff. Interesting. Goff, we've talked about this multiple times, but Goff, if you look at the career numbers of Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, it's the same guy. Just basically the same career numbers a lot.
It's Spider-Man meme, the pointing at each other.
Yeah, it should be. If someone hadn't made that yet, somebody jump on that. But interesting team in Detroit. A lot of people are starting to kind of put them in as possible wild card contenders. I don't know about that quite yet, but they've got some interesting pieces there. So Goff is another guy, kind of like Wentz, that gets probably more grief personally than he deserves as a quarterback. He's not a league winner by any means, but he can be, like you said, if you're putting him around, you said 19, that means you feel like he's a competent fantasy option in a super flex league, which means, to you, he's more than fantasy relevant.
Well, let's move on to running backs, my favorite position. We'll run through consensus, then we'll run through a couple of the players that we have ranked different than our consensus. Either you're higher, you're lower, whatever. We just went through the spiel. JT is going to be 1. That's pretty obvious. Christian McCaffrey at 2. Austin Eckler, my boy, at 3. Najee Harris at 4. DeAndre Swift at 5. Dalvin Cook at 6. Derrick Henry at 7. Joe Mixon at 8. Aaron Jones at 9, Leonard Fournette at 10, Saquon Barkley at 11, Travis Etienne at 12, Javonte Williams at 13, Nick Chubb at 14, Zeke Elliott at 15, David Montgomery at 16, James Conner at 17, Breece Hall at 18, Alvin Kamara at 19, Elijah Mitchell at 20, and just outside the top 20, Cam Akers at 21, right there for those who are wondering. Who's someone on here that you are higher on than our consensus and lower on?
Interestingly, when I'm looking at it, Travis Etienne really kind of sticks out to me, and I love him as a prospect overall. I was looking at an article from Pro Football Focus that was comping him coming out of college to Marshawn Lynch. Their numbers were quite common. Now, clearly, Etienne's not going to project to be the same kind of violent NFL runner, but their college numbers compared really well. Etienne was far more involved as a receiver, but overall, it was a pretty fair comparison. I'm really excited about him. And then you're looking at what gets me is it's his rookie season, but it's Doug Peterson there as Jacksonville. I mean, you couldn't have gotten in a million years. You couldn't have thought of a more toxic, incompetent situation than what the Jaguars had last year. Fortunately, they were smart enough to cut bait, and I don't think people understand what a significant upgrade that Doug Peterson is. And I went back and looked at his coaching career, and I wanted to tell you in 7 seasons he's been either an offensive coordinator or the head coach calling an offense. His team's averaged 8.5 touchdown runs, which of their running backs. So that's a good number. But this is where they finished in terms of rushing: 10th, 6th, 11th, 3rd, 28th. And that was an injury-riddled year for the Eagles. 11th and 9th. So all but one of those seasons, you're talking about a top 11 rushing offense. Now, yes, a lot of that had to do with his first couple of years. He had Jamal Charles, who was dominant, but he still managed to have pretty relevant roles for guys like Darren Sproul, who caught, I want to say 51 balls for them one year. Miles Sanders, I think in 2019, rushed for over 800 yards and caught 50 passes. This is the kind of role I envision for Etienne. I think it's a great story that James Robinson, apparently is ahead of pace in recovering from Achilles, but I think maybe as a community, we're kind of underestimating how significant an injury that is. And it's probably because, Cam Akers' miraculous recovery is getting people think, oh, well,
he's Wolverine.
This Achilles thing's no problem. Like, I don't know. I figured that, Etienne's going to be getting the lion's share of carries there. I feel like, and that's why his numbers are, pop to me and they stand out, quite significantly. I have a lot of optimism in that offense with Peterson, and it's like I said, there's no way that it could be better. And then another guy like towards the end there is Alvin Kamara. So I'm still, as the person that's generally doing these projections for us, I'm still approaching that situation with a lot of caution. However, watching your show when you had Drew on a couple weeks ago, you talked about how it's kind of starting to look like that. Kamara, he may escape any sort of punishment until next season. So that's something we're going to have to look at, because clearly Alvin Kamara at RB19 is.
So let's just say that we find out tomorrow morning Alvin Kamara is not going to face trial this year, that there's no legal action going to happen in 2022. Where does Alvin Kamara end up in your rankings? For me, he's probably the running back 3, in my opinion, right behind Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I was about to say he gets in their top 5 with Taylor, McCaffrey, Eckler, and Najee Harris. Harris, you can argue, Kamara, Harris, or whatnot, but Harris has that, that crazy share of touches there in Pittsburgh. But yeah, I slide him ahead of DeAndre Swift and put him up there.
Okay, I think for me, a couple players that I'm lower on than our consensus is one, Derrick Henry. Again, it's on the fade list over at Full-Time Fantasy. He's amounted over 1,400 touches in his career. Injuries now starting to pop up. We're at that age where running backs start to take its toll. The age cliff is there.
A key number for elite running backs, and from a fantasy perspective, is the age 27. Because once you move beyond that number, it's actually scary how rarely we see 28-plus-year-old running backs manage to put out these top 5 fantasy campaigns. And we have multiple backs that are at 27 right now or have already crossed that number who are currently top 10 guys.
Yeah, they may as well hand a running back his AARP card at 27, right? When he turns 27, he's get his retirement card, he's good to go. But Derrick Henry has approached that number. So for me, Derrick Henry doesn't even crack my top 10 in my rankings for running backs. He's actually behind Saquon Barkley. I have him one spot ahead of Travis Etienne. Joe Mixon's another one. Just again, strength of schedule. You look at also that shootout schedule for fantasy purposes, and I know that has nothing to do with rankings, but it does slightly because that's going to be 3 weeks of hell for him. And this offense is going to be pretty pass heavy. So for
those maybe new to the show who aren't sure what the shootout is, can you?
Oh yes, thank you for. Yeah, shootout schedule for those who aren't familiar with it are going to be weeks 15, 16, 17 in the fantasy football world. In the high-stakes community, that is where, and even in best ball tournaments, that is where you're playing for all the marbles. It's where, all the points matter, and so.
Right, it's a collective total for all the weeks, as opposed to winning just 1 week and moving on, right?
Yeah, correct. And so, they're combining week 15, 16, 17 total points. So Joe Mixon in that regard is lower, but also just from a strength of schedule perspective and how I anticipate this pace of play being in this team. I feel that they're going to be passing the ball more, or one of the highest passing attempt teams in the league. We're probably going to see another running back get involved this year because Samaje Perine was not the answer. I would expect Chris Evans probably to be a little bit more involved here in 2022, which is going to eat a little bit into Joe Mixon. And running back 8 to me is high. I have him behind Leonard Fournette, behind Aaron Jones, who I think are going to take on more of that. Aaron Jones, more of the pass catching role. And you look at the splits from, Davante Adams being on and off the field. He's averaged, I think it was like 14 point whatever fantasy points per game when Adams was on the field, and it was like 21 fantasy points a game when Davante Adams was off the field. So expect, a significant bump in usage in the passing game for Aaron Jones. I would not be surprised if he was the, number 2 most targeted individual player on this Green Bay offense. So Aaron Jones to me is more in that running back, 7-8 range. I'm high on Travis Etienne. I think an argument can be made that he should be in the top 10 in running backs, but I'm going to pump the brakes just slightly there just because he does not have the body or the frame to be able to handle, 200 plus touches and as well as all the receiving work. So it's going to have to be somebody. That's why they drafted Snoop Conner, in my opinion. James Robinson, it was impressive to see him start moving and running at camp, although the videos you could tell he clearly favored his right leg from his left Achilles tear is still showing that he doesn't fully trust it. And that's not NFL speed. He's not taking hits. He's running things at partial pace, and it's a completely different game once you go to 100% NFL speed and you start taking hits. So I don't expect him to be on the field working 100% come week 1, 2, 3. I was actually surprised to see how far he's progressed already, but I do think that Snoop Conner will be involved in that role as well. So from there, the one person that I'm a lot higher on versus our consensus is Breece Hall. And Breece Hall is our running back 18 here. I think a real argument could be made for him to be pushed up to 15 or 16. I definitely have him ahead of David Montgomery, who is our consensus running back 16. Breece Hall is a 3-down back. When I did the videos for the rookie videos on the YouTube page, you can see who he's been compared to. I mean, we have analysts, not just myself, who have compared him to the likes of Herschel Walker, LaDainian Tomlinson. When you start talking about this type of talent of back, the Jets kind of are a shitty landing spot, don't get me wrong, but these should be utilized pretty heavily. And when I say heavily, we're talking about easily 3-down back. He's got passing reception skills. He's got great cut ability. I mean, I could see this kid handling 20 touches a game and getting anywhere from 4 or 5 catches a game. So
let me ask
Breece
you,
Hall,
what percentage, if you had to gamble right now, what percentage do you think that he can be a top 10 rookie running back on that team in 2022?
Top 10 running back, not rookie.
Top 10 fantasy running back in 2022. What percentage do you think that's likely to happen?
Ooh, I'd probably put it about 40%, maybe 37%.
Yeah, that's about what I was thinking too.
Says, I mean, you still have a lot of good names in the top 10, right? With JT, CMC, Eckler, Najee. There's a lot.
We talked about some of these, veterans starting to slip a little bit, which is what you'd have to have for someone like Hall on that offense to come in. But the biggest thing potentially drawing back Breece Hall on that offense is, of course, quarterback. Until that is a little more stable, until we have, unless Zach Wilson makes significant strides in year 2 with his accuracy, first and foremost, then, a little bit of a concern. But as talent, like I said, I wrote his profile before you recorded it. We both loved him. And everyone else does too. And with great reason. He's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to see his usage here, especially as we approach. We're now a week away from football. We have football next week.
Yeah, a week from right now.
Yes. It's like a kid in the candy store. Like as soon as football's on, like I'm glued.
It's like the excitement among DFS Twitter every year when that first slate of preseason games comes up, because it's like, oh my god, we finally get something to do, and you're starting all these crappy running backs that you've never heard of, these undrafted free agents, because you heard that they might get 10 touches. Like, oh. Okay.
I love the post that Scott did in the Discord channel, and it was who leads the game in scoring for that game, and I put Daniel Carlson because he's the only one who's going to see 100% of the snaps. Everyone else is going to get maybe a series or 2, get pulled. The next crew gets a couple series, maybe a quarter, and they'll get pulled. Guess who's always on the field? It's the damn kicker. So. Daniel Carson was my guess. Who's a running back here that you are lower on? Well, I guess you said Travis Etienne, I guess.
No, I'm not lower on Travis Etienne. Of the top guys, he's still right now is RB10 for me. But Leonard Fournette, okay, it's a little bit of concern now. I know he was on the Eddie Lacy off-season plan, which, it might not necessarily work out, but apparently he dropped a whole bunch of weight, or maybe it's just coach talk because they don't want to mess with his confidence. But what about the touches? Lenny came in and he was, catching all the passes last year and doing all the runs and all that, and he was fantastic, top 5, until he got hurt right when we needed him the most. Can't hold that against him. These things happen. But now you're bringing in Rashaan White, who I love as a prospect, Billy.
Yeah, we both did.
Watched your video breakdown. I want to say he was one of your top 5 running backs, before the draft.
I think he was 3 or 4, if I remember right.
Potential 3-down talent, excellent receiver who, as Leonard Fournette. So while he gets a whole bunch of opportunities, he gets a whole bunch of volume as a pass catcher. Generally, when you look at places like Pro Football Focus, he's not generally regarded as a very good receiver. And if the Bucs are going to move into a more analytical background, maybe they're looking at numbers and realizing that, hey, Leonard Fournette he catches fine. He's not a bad receiver in any format, but throwing to Rashaan White is more of a plus EV move for us. So maybe we need to start getting him on the field more on third down. So there's a little bit of risk. And then of course, you're removing Bruce Arians from that offense. While I still plenty high on Tampa's passing game because I haven't moved. We've got Mike Evans, top 5. We've got Tom Brady, top 5. My boy Chris Godwin, I had him quite a bit higher until I started getting more skeptical. Russell Gage, Julio Jones, loaded offense, but haven't necessarily lowered anything for the rushing attack quite yet. But I don't know. He feels like based on what he did last year, and that he's still technically he's 27, so he's still in his prime. You can't lower him too much. You give him the benefit of doubt, but Leonard Fournette's kind of a guy to me that when he's on the board, I'm a little like, if I have him or Barkley, I'm gonna want to get some shares of Barkley just because of that potential upside that we've all kind of been hoping that we see from Barkley again after his rookie campaign.
Yep.
And then there's, Javonte Williams is on the board with Leonard Fournette. I think I'm probably going to jump on Javonte Williams over him. So like I'm saying is that you can expect probably to see Fournette maybe trickle down our rankings a little bit.
I'm going to list a couple names, and I want you to tell me. And this is not draft related. We're not in a draft. We're not on the clock. This is simply projections and rankings. We're at the end of 2022, so play along here. We are now looking over the running back standings and the fantasy output from these running backs. I'm going to list a couple names, and I want you to tell me if you're surprised or not surprised that they finished ahead of Leonard Fournette in the 2022 season. Saquon Barkley, surprised or not surprised?
I would not be surprised, no.
Travis Etienne, surprised or not surprised?
No, he's about the same area. No, it wouldn't shock me at all.
Javonte Williams, surprised or not surprised?
I think I'm going to expect Javonte to finish ahead of Leonard Fournette, so no.
Okay. Nick Chubb, surprised or not surprised?
Nick Chubb is superior talent. He's a better long-distance runner. He can get everything he needs running. He just lacks a little bit of that receiving volume. Still, no, it would not surprise me to see Nick Chubb finish ahead of him.
Okay. Zeke Elliott, surprised or not surprised?
Well, Zeke's one of the more underrated guys in football. For a guy that's much maligned that we all are ready to, do away with, he was RB7 last year. And if we're kind of expecting Tony Pollard to move into the slot and take on some of that pass catching duty for at least while Michael Gallup is laid up in September, you kind of have to like Zeke. So it wouldn't surprise me. No, that's more like, honestly, it feels like that's a 50-50 proposition.
Okay, so we're getting closer towards the tail end now. James Conner, surprised or not surprised?
But James Conner was my boy. He was my comeback player of the year pick last summer, and clearly I loved him overall. I mentioned how the Cardinals, they averaged more than 20 rushing touchdowns a season under Cliff Kingsbury, and I knew that James Conner was going to be short yardage at best, and he really came through for us. But that said, it feels like maybe he peaked a little bit. So as much as I love James Conner as a player, as a fantasy option, he's a great person with his comeback from cancer. I just love him personally. But I think this is the point now where, as much as I like James Conner, if I'm doing 10 drafts, I'm probably taking Lenny over him 6-4. So I'll be somewhat surprised, but not shocked or nothing.
Okay, the last name I'm going to mention, surprised or not surprised, is Breece Hall.
Right now, I would be pretty surprised because that would be really, really phenomenal for Breece Hall. I know he's got the talent, but to me, it's that lack of confidence in Zach Wilson under center to be able to maintain what we all want out of Wilson, out of Elijah Moore, all the options on that offense. Which with the right quarterback in place, the Jets have like a lot of really fun potential to be like one of them awesome. I'm not going to comp them with the Bengals, but if Zach Wilson were significantly had a better season as a rookie than what he did, we would be thinking, hey, this is going to be the new triplets offense in the Jets. They're all 22 or younger. They can all get down the field. They got speed. They got the right coaching in place. It's got the potential there. So, yeah, I would be pretty surprised with Breece Hall. As much as I love Breece's potential, the offensive line is, actually another. It's not a concern. I think their line was actually pretty good last year. I think the Jets' pass blocking was top 5 or whatever it was last year, which raises more red flags about Zach Wilson. But
so Breece Hall to me is the only one I'd kind of be like, oh, that's a little shocking, right? Everybody else, I would say it's all within the realm of possibilities of them finishing.
I had a redraft. I'd want some of Breece Hall over Fournette, but you're talking like maybe an 8-2 split or 7-3.
Yeah. So, again, we're not drafting, just purely ranking since we're at the end of the year. And what I just did there was just to show our listeners how close it is between running back 10 and running back 18 in rankings, right? When we're talking about the projections for these players, between every single player I just mentioned, we're talking about a combined 19 fantasy points. That's nothing, right? And so we're splitting hairs amongst all these players when trying to do projections and trying to figure out who's going to reign supreme and rise to the top. Like, none of those players outside Breece Hall would really surprise me if they all finished ahead of Leonard Fournette. Now, situation-wise, I think that we can all agree Fournette's probably in the better situation of most of those players, with Tom Brady at helm, a lot more red zone attempts, still going to be heavily involved in the passing game as well as the rushing game. So that's why we have him at 10, but I agree with you. He's probably going to trickle down our rankings here as we get closer to the season. Let's skip forward to wide receiver. This one's fun because I know we have a difference in just 1 and 2 between you and I. We've talked about this off air. You have Kupp at 1. I have Jefferson at 1. Convince me, and we're splitting hairs here, but convince me why you like Cooper Kupp at 1 over Jefferson.
I don't actually personally have. I have Jefferson over Kupp personally in my rankings. This is more of other people on the team. So this is more of a consensus thing. It's not far off. It's very, very close. So
we're changing it right now. Move Jefferson to the top. We're moving it live on the show.
Listen, it's those top 3 guys that are on a tier by themselves, right? You could argue, well, I mean, you don't see Chase get argued over Kupp too much, but after that record-breaking rookie year,
it's now in discussion.
Like, you're nuts to do that, but there's a significant drop-off after those 3. I feel like after this show that, yes, I'll get back and play with the projections a little bit to get Jefferson up because, Jefferson already is a phenomenal player. And now we're talking about this potential of this Minnesota Vikings offense to go extremely pass heavy, which is like music to our ears, right? Because they're already churning out a whole bunch of fantasy talent there. And then with the Rams, we talked about Allen Robinson. So you're talking about a really, really boosted number 2 player who could potentially take some targets away from Kupp. Now, he's not going to outplay Kupp and on it's just he's going to command more targets than anyone that the Rams could put at wide receiver 2 last year. We saw Beckham down the stretch become actually pretty significant end zone threat, but overall, when you look at Odell Beckham's volume down the stretch, it wasn't that great. He was a little reliant on the touchdown, whereas a guy like Allen Robinson, we all know he can catch at every level and everywhere in the field. And with this entire offseason, they've been working and get this entire preseason still ahead of us for them to get the chemistry going there. So you can see, it's nuts to think that there's not going to be some regression for Cooper Kupp as awesome as he was last year.
He had a historical season. I mean, in terms of yardage, only behind Megatron's 2,000-yard season.
It was basically like what we, the kind of crap we haven't seen since Jerry Rice in his heyday. So to expect that to happen in back-to-back years, I mean,
unrealistic. So for me, and I'm going to say this again. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Justin Jefferson is a tier zone. He's the wide receiver 1, in my opinion, and no one else is even in the discussion to compete with him at 1. It breaks down to consistency. And if you want to bring in Cooper Kupp, we could talk about Chase. Chase only had 1 year. It was phenomenal. If we see it this year again, that brings on the discussion versus Justin Jefferson, I think. But as of today, Jefferson has now showed it in back-to-back seasons. His rookie year, he finished with 1,400 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns as wide receiver 9 in his rookie year. The wide receiver 9. 2021, he finishes with 1,600 yards and 10 touchdowns as the wide receiver 4. You compare that to Cooper Kupp, who has only sniffed the top 10 twice in his 6-year career. I'm not going to count 2018 when he got injured, so let's just look at 17, 19, 20, and 21. Only 2 of those years has he even finished inside the top 10. Of course, we had a historic year last year. 2019, he finished as wide receiver 7. Then the other 2 years we're looking back at is 2020 and 2017, finished as wide receiver 28 and wide receiver 30 in fantasy points per game. So consistency is a big determination or I should say a reason in why I have Jefferson in a tier of his own. The next tier for me is Cooper Kupp and Chase. I think that's pretty clear. You could throw Diggs in that mix as well. But I clearly think Jefferson is in a tier of his own, not only just because of his elite play, but also from his consistency. And now they have the nuts passing game. They really do. This whole system has been changed. It's going to be favoring the passing game more versus the rushing game, which what we saw with the previous system. Justin Jefferson wheels up, I think, in 2022. I mean, I was amazed at his ADP in the beginning of the years. I was getting him at the turn of the 1-2. It just made no sense. And that's the benefit of early drafting. So yeah. JJ number 1 overall, hands down for me.
Imagine the glory days of February and March when you were getting Justin Jefferson at the top of the 2nd round, and you were getting Allen Robinson in the 7th or the 8th round. Oh, yeah.
I got Pittman at 7-4 in some of those early drafts.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about it. So Michael Pittman, that's a guy we have at wide receiver 9, and I feel really comfortable about that.
I'm ready to move him up to 8.
I sent out a tweet a couple weeks ago asking people who they preferred Michael Pittman over Tyreke Hill. And Tyreke, I want to say, ended up winning maybe 58, 59% of the vote, but I'm not seeing it, man. I'm expecting Tyreke to regress quite a bit. I just don't have that much confidence in Tua.
Well, we look at the amount of slots that not only Tyreke ran, but also Waddle ran. They both ran top 17 in the league in slot reps. Something has to give, right? Somebody's going to lose some of that volume. And so they're both going to lose it. It was the answer. It's not just one of them. And it's going to affect both their fantasy points. So we have 2 similar players competing for similar roles. Tyreke is definitely more of a deep threat, but you don't pay a man this much money and give up that many draft picks for just a deep threat. So
I have a hard time seeing Tua Tagovailoa, and I'm having trouble saying it.
Tua, just say Tua. I don't ever even try.
I'm having a lot of trouble seeing Tua supporting a pair of wide receiver 2s in football. Like I said, I'm just having a little bit of trouble. That's why I have a little bit of trepidation with Tyreke Hill. Like, he's still wide receiver 10 on our numbers, but I mean, me personally, I don't think I would even touch him there. And then we're quite a bit lower on Jalen Waddle. I loved it. Him as a rookie last year. I loved what he did, but you add Cedric Wilson and Tyreke Hill. So last year, I've written this a couple times, accounted for 221 targets last year. Granted, both were on different teams, but these guys are going to play. And then you're looking at Chase Edmonds, a very good pass-catching running back, and they brought him in, and they're paying him to come in and be a factor in that area too. I don't see where the targets that can support Jalen Waddle again are. And so, if we were talking wide receiver fades, he's a guy, like, as much as I loved him last year, I don't know, I'm having trouble. My brain, the way it works, is having a little trouble coming up with the logic there.
Another receiver I want to talk about is DK Metcalf. We understand the Seattle Seahawks quarterback situation is less than ideal. But if Geno Smith wins this job, for me, DK Metcalf needs to be moved up boards drastically.
Got him. We got him around 17 right now, but yes,
yep.
I'm completely on board with you. And I tweeted it again this week. I talked about Geno Smith. I actually broke down all of their box scores last year. I tweeted it last weekend, and that ended up being a funny thing about plagiarism, because some kid ended up following up on me a few hours later and was like, "Oh, he had to apologize to me." It's all good. We're all looking at the same thing and thinking the same things. But yes, in the 4 starts and 1 quarter that Geno Smith played, he threw 5 touchdowns. 4 of them went to DK Metcalf, including an 81-yarder. So in all those games, Metcalf, I want to say, had only one game he had fewer than volume was low in one game, but that's the game he caught 2 touchdowns. So he was, pretty solid in all those outings with Geno Smith. I didn't look at Tyler Lockett's numbers in those games. It might be interesting to do because,
So during that stretch with Geno, that's weeks 5 through 8, DK Metcalf was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy points per game. The wide receiver 4. The only 3 players ahead of him were A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, and Cooper Kupp. I'm going to read off his lines there. He went 5 for 5 with 2 touchdowns and 98 yards in week 5, wide receiver number 9. Week 6 was the bummer week. He went 6 of 7 for 58 yards, no score. Week 7, 2 of 5 for 96 yards and a touchdown, wide receiver 12 that week. In the final week, week 8, he went 6 of 6, 2 touchdowns and 43 yards, wide receiver 9.
Yeah, but even on that, you call it his bummer week. He caught 6 passes for 58. Is that right?
Exactly.
11.8 points. I mean, it's not like that's in your lineup and you're like, you're furious. I mean, at least it's double digits, right?
Yeah. So DK Metcalf, to me, regardless of the quarterback, and I would argue that we may see similar production from Drew Lock, who's less than ideal.
It's complete unknown. We don't know. We haven't seen the chemistry. We haven't seen them do anything together. It sounds like the early reports are leaning towards Geno Smith, but in all reality, clearly the Seahawks are in a rebuild. We know who Geno Smith is. He's been in the league long enough where we know he's very limited. It might benefit Pete Carroll and the staff to say, you know what, even though we feel more comfortable with Geno, this is kind of a lost year for us. Let's see what we have with Drew Lock. Let's give the kid a shot. And if he's terrible, then we just secured a better draft spot. So
my opinion about it is that regardless of how terrible either of these quarterbacks are, DK Metcalf is fucking huge. He's 6'3", 228 pounds. The dude has just massive arm length. It's like
today.
It's 34 and 7/8 inches, 99th percentile. The dude's an animal, right? Worst case scenario, they throw it up and it gets interception. We know he can fucking chase a guy down and tackle him. Right? we saw that already last year. So DK Metcalf to me is someone I have a lot higher on than most analysts, most rankings, simply because he's that big body target. We just saw him secure a big bag today in a contract. Argument can be made for DK Metcalf in the top 12. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm not going to say exactly where I'm ranked right now because those aren't finalized, but 17 is where we have him consensus. I'm going to say that for me, he's closer to 12 as of today. Let's move on to tight end. And this one, we're pretty damn close on almost every player. There's only a couple. Only a couple on here.
A lot about tight end this offseason, so it's not really a surprise for me to see that we're, pretty similar in this grouping. And it's another position I feel like it's extremely top heavy in the sense of you got that group of 4 or 5 guys that you really feel like are standout players. But after that, there might be the next group of tight ends might be 15, 18 deep, where it's guys like, I'll just keep waiting. I'll wait another round and I'll grab, fill in the blank, whoever.
So I'm going to list off our top 20, and then I'm going to throw a name out there who's not in the top 20 consensus who I have that I want to talk about. Travis Kelce at 1, Mark Andrews at 2, Kyle Pitts at 3, George Kittle at 4, Darren Waller at 5, Schultz at 6, TJ Hawkinson at 7, Zach Ertz at 8, Dallas Goedert at 9, Cole Kmet at 10. Right now, this is identical to mine as well. Gesicki at 11, Pat Freiermuth at 12. We got a little different there. Albert O at 13, Hunter Henry at 14, Higbee at 15, Knox at 16, Hayden Hurst at 17, Evan Ingram at 18, Gerald Everett 19, David Njoku 20. The name I did not mention is Austin Hooper, who's at 22. And for me, Austin Hooper comes in at my tight end number 12.
12. Well, what I will say about them is I've heard that him and Ryan Tannehill have looked really, really on the same page throughout OTAs and so far here in the early part of training camp. So, that's good. But it goes to show what I just said a couple minutes ago is how deep that second part of tight end is. Because Austin Hooper, again, if you feel comfortable with him, well, then if he's down here, around QB 18 to 22, or in some cases, maybe even outside people's top 25, it just goes to show, like, I'm going to load up on running back and wide receiver. So I'm just going to take tight end later. If I feel like I can get a guy that I'm that confident in, I'm that comfortable with that late at that kind of ADP, you might as well just wait.
Have you been looking at my draft boards, Jody? Because that's exactly what I've been doing.
Yeah, I've done it. Well, what happens is when I do when I want to do an FFWC draft review, which I've been trying to do every week or so, I want to be unbiased. So I asked you guys, can you send me a draft board, cut off the team names? I want to look at it unbiased. Well, because you and I are generally on the same page with guys, I've always, find your teams. I'm like, this guy knows what he's doing, or this guy's hitting a lot of, my kind of targets and whatnot. So, I can generally kind of, I think, recognize your teams, but trying to look at it unbiased, I try not to think that's probably Billy's team, but you've always probably gotten one of the what I call when I grade those teams is the contenders. I'm sure you've been on there every time.
Austin Hooper to me is a guy who has a major workload and target share in this offense. Treylon Burks is finally back on the field, looking like his conditioning is fine now. Like I told everybody before, don't believe the asthma rumors. Nonetheless, the discount's probably going away. I still believe Hooper is going to be one of the go-to targets. If he's not the second option, definitely a third option in the passing game. Although it is not a pass-first offense, we all know this is a run-first offense. But I do expect them to run less this year. I don't think they want to continue to break the big dog down. So I expect Hooper to be utilized in a similar fashion to how he was in the Falcons offense. And when he was with the Falcons, he was a top 5 tight end. It's why he got the contract he did with the Cleveland Browns, who misutilized him and paired him with Njoku and then drafted Bryant. Like, it just didn't make any sense. So now I feel like he's going to be in a place where he's going to be utilized again. He's going to be volume dependent, and I think that volume is going to be there for him to succeed. I can see him easily being the number 2 option in this passing game, if not the number 3 on a week-to-week basis. And I think from a tight end perspective, that's about all you can ask for. And so tight end 2022, you look at where he's going inside of drafts over at the FFWC. And when I say in drafts, I'm talking about consensus rankings. I know I harped on it earlier, but it's still a good thing to look at. Tight end 19 off the board in the FFWC, going around pick 165, 170, 183, all in the last 3 drafts. So that is why I've been pushing and pushing and pushing tight end, because I can get, in my opinion, a player who has the ability to finish as a tight end 1 very, very, very late in drafts. I think that's it, dude. I think we made it through it all.
Oh, we're moving on to defensive tackles now?
If you want, let's do it. No. People are like, I'm out. Also, watch all the subscribers log off. Yeah. Or was that the song 0 to 100 real quick, right? But backwards. I think that's it, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Again, congratulations to Jody finishing 8th overall in the contest. I'm just going to hang up the belt again. I finished number 1.
Major props to the champ right there, people.
This is championship right here.
The new blood.
Let's bring it back in 2022. I'd love for us to both finish in the top 10 again. I don't even care if it's 1 or 2. Let's do it. Let's bring it back in 2022. We have a couple questions here. Where can I find Billy's rankings, not just consensus? We are going to be posting them. I was talking with Scott today, the owner of Full Time Fantasy. We're going to be releasing separate rankings as well by next week is the plan. So bear with me. Jody is the main contributor over here when it comes to content. I am just a solely grinder in the high stakes community that happens to be pretty good at rankings. But I'm going to be throwing them together here for next week to separate them from the consensus rankings for people to look at. And then Jody and I will have a lot more talking points moving forward as well. So those will be available shortly. I will post them or a link, I should say. I'm not going to post them. I'll post them a link on Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter at FF Muzio, if you follow Jody at Jody Smith NFL, we will post that link to those rankings so people know when they're live, so you can download those and utilize them inside your drafts, because we're at drafting season, folks. So thanks for tuning in, Jody. Always a pleasure, buddy. I'm excited to chat with you and to continue on in 2022. Let's bring back that championship. I like what Wheeler says. Smash the like, people. Smash it. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. We'll see you all back here tomorrow. I'm with Dwayne McFarland doing a live. What was that?
I said thanks, Kev.
Thanks, Kev. I'm back tomorrow with Dwayne McFarland from PFF doing a live Player Profiler Championship draft. That's a $300 buy-in over at FFWC. There's also a live contest tonight if you want to join as well. Head on over to FFWC. Use promo code MUZIO, MUZIO. Gets you $100 off a 3-pack. And if you win your league, you get a free Player Profiler all-in package valued at $130. So thanks again for everybody for tuning in. We'll see you all back here.